my name's Kelly from Team Flower. I have got an online support community with flower lovers from all over the world, and it is my mission and our mission here at Team Flower to help you in your journey with flowers. A question that people ask me all the time is, what flowers last out of water? So many of us have businesses doing event work or things like that where we might have to put flowers in a place without a water source, perhaps in a garland or some type of installation work or something like that. And so the very, very best way to become familiar with that, I feel like people ask because they're anxious, because they're not sure if they want to try this or that for an upcoming event. The very best way to feel more confident is to actually test it and do it yourself. I will say, so I've done a test, but I will say that there are a few overarching concepts or principles that you can use to know if something will last very well out of water, and also that just because I'm showing you these particular pieces, I feel like pretty confident that this will work in a variety of scenarios. But you have to remember too that these flowers are all coming from a unique set of circumstances. The rain that they received, the care that they had upon before they ever even made it to you. Like every flower, a sunflower that comes, it's a sunflower, but it has had a variety of environmental factors that could affect its strength in lasting out of water. So let's just say that a plant was planted and it really struggled along as a tiny seedling. It might not be quite as tough as something that had the exact nutrients that it needed and was really able just to flourish and be strong the whole way through. So keep in mind that there's a lot of factors at play. There's a lot of things that these plants have experienced that you and I will never really know the fullness of. But whenever I'm choosing something for out of water, I want to know the texture of the actual petals. So like, for example, a hydrangea, listen, do you hear how it sounds papery? I know that that will more than likely be totally fine out of water because it's already started this drying process. So I know that the blooms will pretty much all stay intact and that that will be a good one out of water. Hydrangea, a little bit earlier, kind of has like a soft or sticky feeling. I knew that this one would not hold its shape quite as well as this one would whenever I was doing that test. So when you can actually touch the flower and see the texture of it, I feel like that is really helpful. If it feels nice and crispy, it's going to hold better out of water than something that already feels a little bit floppy. If it has a really smooth, shiny coating on the outside of the leaf, I know that it's probably going to do a lot better out of water than something that maybe has like a very sticky or hairy kind of leaf. So that leaf texture plays a part in it as well. Let me show you. These are all summer blooms. So this is what lasts out of water? Summer edition. Let's do it. Let's go. I have done two different tests. So all of these flowers have been out of water for about 18 hours now. These have all been left in an inside temperature controlled environment of about room temperature, about 72 degrees. All of these over here have been baking. They baked outside in the sun in temperature ranges between 80 and 95 degrees in a variety of shade and sun. So let's see what was super tough and what made it. Okay, we talked about the hydrangea. We talked about the differences, how to know which one of these to pick. These would be fine in 90-degree temperatures. These might start to actually get a little bit burnt or brown, but hydrangea. Next, I have status. Status also feels papery like those hydrangea, and you can see that this is virtually the same as it was whenever I left it out of water. The ones that have been outside baking, also virtually the same, just feel a little bit crispier. Status. Celosia. a little bit limp and wimpy. The ones that have been outside look even rougher. So this is not something that I would probably add to an arbor or a place where I need this to go out of water. So celosia, not going to choose to do that with. This was another celosia. This one fared a little bit better than this one that was outside in the heat. Regardless, I'm not a big fan of celosia out of water unless it's a little bit older. That's another core thing of flowers lasting well out of water. If they are new, tender growth, almost never will they do super well out of water. But once the plant has had some time to mature, sometimes they really can do well out of water. For example, a hellebore. This isn't winter edition, but I will mention that one as well because some people have trouble with that one. The older the plant is, the hardier that it will be, just like the hydrangea. They turn to this papery feeling later in the summertime. This is a different type of hydrangea, the one that has a little bit of the lacy stems with the frilly flowers on the outside. Still has that nice texture. This is one that I will use in boutonnieres, corsages, arbors, the whole 9 yards. This one is generally fine. Again, earlier the plant is, sometimes the tips or the little things at the edges of the flower can wilt if it's out of water. But generally, I feel like this is one that I feel comfortable with and is safe. A little more floppy celosia. Okay, this is fall or Japanese anemone foliage. Not super great out of water. This is an Aspen Rose. I mean, really, you can barely even tell that this has been out of water for all of this time. This is the one that has been inside, and this is the one that has been outside. You will notice whenever I pinch on it that this one is much softer than this one is. When I feel this one, it still feels cool. The petals feel pretty smooth. This one feels very warm, and the petals are starting to get sticky. Anytime a flower starts to get sticky, that means it is closer to death. So, anyway, that's the scoop on these Aspen Roses. Dill, I took 2 different samples of where they were in their life cycle process. So this dill is more, has gone more to seed. It has these kind of like harder, tougher pieces. This one's still in flower. Both of them, this is the inside. These both look great. I would feel very comfortable in putting dill outside of water if it was, you know, something that I was working on. This is the one that's been baking in the sun. The color has been affected just a little bit by it. But again, baking sun, I trust the dill. I would say that this wins over in the can come out of water sedum. Very succulent type of texture to this flower. Perfectly fine out of water. In both types of scenarios, the sedum is really great. Oh, this used to be mint. No on the outside for mint. Dahlias, let's talk about this because this is one that I feel like can be a little bit tricky. I had 2 different dahlias. So this one was inside, this one has been baking in the sun. When I checked on the things that had been outside overnight in mid-80s degree weather before the sun came out and started baking it, this one looked actually perfectly fine. So, and then this one that's been inside, it's really just kind of losing its shape structure on the back side of the flower, and this front facing part of the flower still looks pretty intact. I have done arbors where the dahlias have just been gently placed in and laced throughout, maybe smilax or forsythia or other types of blooms. And late in the fall, this is another one of those things, I trust it more as the season progresses, but I have had these out of water in large scale pieces and been very happy and fine with the results. But if it is in a place where it's going to be just baking and hot sun, you can expect it to wilt just a little bit. Here's a sunflower that's been out overnight inside. Still looking pretty good. Happy with the results on that. Straw flowers. The actual petals still look exactly the same. But the thing about straw flowers is that the little stems do tend to be pretty fragile, so they're gonna be limp. But if this is something that you're gluing into a corsage or a boutonniere or something like that, or maybe you're gonna wire it, if this was wired, I would feel totally comfortable with it being on some kind of wearable or anything like that. But if you're doing it in an arrangement and there is a need for it to be nice and upright out of water, straw flower is really not the greatest pick for something like that. You can see this one that's been baking, again, looks exactly the same. So straw flowers, those are a win, those stay. Viburnum berries and foliage, fine, totally fine. This one, baking, also totally fine, feels super warm, but fine out of water. And it has that, that glossy bit on those berries to protect them from drying out. Snow on the mountain, this is a type of euphorbia. Be very careful with this if you happen to use it. I'll just mention the sap in it can be dangerous, especially if it gets in your eyes. So be very careful if you use this plant just generally, but not a good out of water idea at all. That one, loser in that category. For this particular application, Cacoleus. This is a glossy leafed plant, a lot of times available from a wholesale supplier. This one was. It has been out of water, actually maybe even a little bit longer than some of these other things have. And I feel like I'm very happy with how it is holding up and how it looks. I'm just reflexing these petals back a little bit. You can see even just the fullness that that creates, but that's not what we're talking about today. The parts of this that have been in direct sun though, like real hot sun, it's turning like, actually looks like it's been burnt. So keep that in mind if you're in a very full sun situation for an extended period of time. But I would totally use this in garlands. I would use it in arbors where you're doing the arbor maybe 2 or 3 hours before the event is taking place. This will hold up really nicely and be fine. Winter pile. Lisianthus. I feel like this held up really well. This one's been inside. What you might find is that some of these more tender little shoots might start to get a little bit floppy, but and this one has been the one that's outside baking. I feel like that this is a winner in both situations. This one's okay. Jasmine. Jasmine. I have a lot of feelings about jasmine. Local jasmine, Carolina jasmine, things that is coming right out of that's maybe growing native where you are, I like. But the jasmine from wholesalers, I feel like can be touch and go sometimes. I can have a really great batch of it, or I can have a really not so great batch of it. So just be aware of that. Anything that is super new growth on the jasmine is gonna get pretty floppy pretty quick. But if you've got some nice tough leaves that feel really sturdy and that they're hydrated, you could do a flower crown with it as long as it's going out and on that flower crown at the last minute is how I would consider and how I would use jasmine if that's an ingredient that you are looking at. This is blue lace flower, really tough, like how this is held up. So this is in kind of its older phase, where we're just seeing those little remaining stamens and the petals have kind of already come off. So again, a later flowering thing, a little bit past, gonna hold better out of the water. Gomphrena, it's so sad whenever it's out into the sun. Look at this one too, really sad. But the pieces, it's kind of like straw flower. It has that same type of feeling. So if this is something that you are gluing or wiring in a bouquet or boutonniere where the stem piece doesn't matter, this wins in the out of water category. This is Sweet William. I don't love how this held. The flower shape I've lost and not real happy with that. The baking anemone leaf, those, nope, no thank you. Baking blue lace flower that we just looked at, still perfectly fine. That one is a good flower out of water. Oh, the Queen Anne's lace. Baking variety, not so good, out of water, younger plant, so this one's been inside but a little bit younger. You can see how it is just as sad as the one that's been out baking, so no to that. Nigella, this is one that the seed pods have already formed on, nice and tight, still nice and upright. This is a great one out of water. When it has the flowers still on Nigella, it still does really well out of water. It's just the teeny tiny little side buds that are younger that do one of these numbers when it's out of water. Amaranthus. This is an upright variety, and I can tell that these little edges right here are very dehydrated, but generally this is holding like surprisingly well for being out of water. The one that has been baking, you can see, is just a little bit floppier, but I feel like this one is a win. I would say yes to this. The one that's been baking also has a little bit of color fading in it, but the length of time it's been out there and has been exposed for most types of projects that you'll be working on was like past the point that your things would need to be looking great and on. Another one of Sweet William. This one, well, this particular flower looks, you know, decently well, the one that hasn't been baking, but I don't know that I would really use this one out of water on the regular, but I suppose if it's inside that you could get away with it, but I'm putting it in the no category. Roses, these are little spray roses, perfectly fine. The ones that have been baking, a little bit floppier, but I feel like that this is still providing a nice little dose of color, especially if it's hanging or up high. I think spray roses are fine. I use them in arbors and installations all the time, putting those in the yes pile. Blue Plurum. Holding really well, holding its shape really well, inside, outside. The color has been affected a little bit by this one. The leaves are curling just a little bit on the ones that have been baking, but I'm gonna put this in the go pile. I like how that has held out of water. This is the disc flower, the Didiscus flower that looks like this, just a little bit younger, and you can see how its neck is, you know, drooping over a little bit. But again, all in all, I think this is a great flower out of water. Peony, peonies. This one's been baking and this one's been inside. These really do, I feel like peonies, if they have got a really high petal count, do really well, surprisingly well out of water. But these ones that are, these are both younger, these were buds that have just come out, and they are a lower petal count. I believe this one is a Duchess. And they have these like more fragile outer petals with this kind of bomb center here. You can take out these more fragile outer petals. These will be the first ones to go. And this inside part right here would be really fine. So I am comfortable leaving peonies out of water as long as the situation isn't extreme. And as long as the flowers are really hardy, in season, and at peak freshness. Now, if you're working, you know, off season or something and they have been held, this is key with peonies. So since these have such a short vase life, some growers will grow a whole bunch, more than they could sell during their like peak time. And they'll do what's called dry storing them, and they will store them out of water, wrapped up real tight in a little blanket in the cooler. When those ones come out, they develop very quickly and the vase life on them is much shorter. Ones that are coming right off the plant during their peak bloom time, those are, see, that's why I like the flowers lasting out of water. It can't just be, there's so much more that you need to know about the flower to be able to determine if it's like a good thing to go for or not. So hopefully this little experiment and lesson is something that will help you feel a little bit more confident as you are starting your experiences. I hope that it will just inspire you to do this. Each time that you get some new flowers in, just, you know, it doesn't take very long as you're processing flowers just to take a bud or a piece or whatever, lay them here, lay them there. If you're working on an event, you're like, oh, what of this should I put in my boutonnieres? Just on Thursday when the flowers come in, set them out. On Friday, come look at them, see which ones you like, which ones you don't, if you're experimenting maybe with something new. My name's Kelly, and it's been so great to have you here today. Go team. We'll see you over at teamflower.org for more content like this.